Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Couch GMs podcast. It is Friday, September 16th, 2022, and I'm your host, George Kerth, joined by Cody Roadcap and Tyler Snyder. How you guys doing on this wonderful Week 2 Friday?
Doing great. A little tired after watching that thrilling Thursday night football game.
Amazing.
Back and forth, high-scoring affair. Chiefs pulled out a nail-biter. It was a great game.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, tired too from staying up and watching that game we haven't seen yet. It was fantastic. No, doing great. Happy to be here.
He totally missed out. We say we're going to do this every single week, so get on board here, Tyler. Every single week, we're going to talk about the best Thursday night game of all time that didn't happen yet when we record, because we record on Thursday before the game. But yes, on today's show, we're going to hit some NFL news and notes, and we're going to give you a preview of Week 2, some start, sit, sleepers, everything you need to know to set your lineups going into Week 2 for a win. Make sure you find us on thecouchgms.com and on our social media channels, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, at The Couch GMs, and join our Discord chat for even more than you get from the podcast. Guys, without further ado, let's just jump into NFL news. Starting off NFL news with interesting one. The Cleveland Browns have had a contest with their fans to come up with a new center field logo that is other than just the orange helmet. And they came up with Brownie the Elf, who I believe used to be a mascot for them, but no longer really is a primary mascot. So I just also wanted to mention in this one, they now have a team with an elf mascot that has fans that bark like dogs. They're named after a color, and their primary color is another color.
Wow. Yeah, it's a way to put it. But, I'm going to talk about the logo real quick at center field. Center field, I guess that's correct. I love it. It's unique. It's different. It's better than the helmet. And if you're an NBA fan out there, some of them have goofy alternate third. And the Philadelphia 76ers dribbling Ben Franklin is my all-time favorite third alternate logo. And that's the vibes I got from Brown of the Elf. So I like it. Let's see if more teams change it up with their midfield logo.
Yeah, I'm really glad the Browns had to let the fans decide their midfield logo and make it whatever they pick just to try to get them to forget the fact that they paid half their salary cap to a guy that's suspended and not playing for him anyway. That's how irrelevant the Browns are becoming. So good job, Browns.
I feel like this would have an even worse vibe if they did lose last week to Baker Mayfield, but the kicker they drafted, which also seemed ridiculous, won them the game. So the Browns are still a mess. They just could be even slightly more of a mess. But anyway, let's move on to some injury news here. We talked earlier in the week about Dak Prescott and TJ Watt. We have a couple of updates. We'll start with Dak Prescott, who had successful surgery on his hand, and his timeline was actually pushed up to 4 to 6 weeks. And Jerry Jones even said he doesn't want to put him on injured reserve because he believes he could play sooner than 4 weeks, which I think is absolutely ridiculous. But what are your guys' thoughts on the Cowboys after hearing this news?
I'm annoyed that they didn't put Dak on the IR yet. As a fantasy owner of Dak, I don't want to drop him yet, but he's not put on the IR, so I can't stash him and pick up another quarterback yet. Pretty frustrating, Cowboys. Get it together. Think about my fantasy team. That's what should be priority number one.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on getting him on the IR. If even it's going to be 4 weeks, let the man rest. I think they're excited because of it's not the exact same injury, but Russell Wilson last year, he beat the odds and came back from his finger injury. So maybe they're hoping Dak can do the same. But like I said, don't tweet at Jerry Jones or Mike McCarthy or Dak himself to be put on the IR for your fantasy. You can complain to us or complain to your friends, but it does stink for all you fantasy owners out there with Dak Prescott.
I think the biggest fantasy impact here, surprisingly, isn't even the passing game. It's the running game. Last year when Dak got injured, the value of Zeke just plummeted. So now anybody who got Ezekiel Elliott, I mean, you might have been excited because, you got Zeke a little later than you were able to last year, but, with no Dak, I don't know if I trust him in my starting lineup.
Yeah, not even Dak. They also lost Connor McGovern, I think is how you pronounce his last name. Another offensive lineman. So,
Yep.
They're already down 3 starters at this point. So it's been a tough start to the season for the Cowboys, and it's going to be hard for them to keep pace with the Eagles, keep pace with the Giants, keep pace with the Commanders. Like, it's crazy to think that, but that's where we're at with them, and they're all going to take a hit fantasy-wise.
Two things that could look up for Zeke, though, I will say. One, Jason Peters did not play last week. He was someone they thought they could bring in to really kind of bolster up that injured offensive line. They were still getting him up to speed and getting him to game shape. So he might play this week. That could help a little bit to get rid of that loss. And the other thing is, Tony Pollard had a lot of pass blocking blunders in week one. So even though he looks good with the ball in his hands, he might lose a couple of snaps on passing downs to Zeke because they want to use him in a pass blocking role, which more time on the field is good for fantasy. We know that.
For sure. The other injury, the big one, not as much for fantasy, but for the NFL, is reigning defensive player of the year, TJ Watt. He does not need surgery. He could be back within 6 weeks, but his team did put him on IR, so he's guaranteed to miss at least 4 games. This doesn't affect him because of when their bye is, but just remember, if you are out there, IR is 4 games, not 4 weeks. So once we start getting into buys, if it happens over bye, they will miss a total of 5 weeks as well. So just keep that in the back of your mind.
Yeah, and I love finding any opportunity possible to squeak the Titans into conversation here, and I'm going to here. The Titans had a stellar undrafted rookie pass rusher in preseason, David Aneni. He really impressed coaches. They were all shocked with him, and he ended up leading preseason in sacks with 3 as an undrafted rookie. Was honestly creating havoc on the line, and then he was still signed to the Titans practice squad instead of their active roster. And the Steelers did go out and sign Aneni to be maybe not the replacement for TJ Watt, but he is at least a depth piece. And if he looks as good as he did in preseason over there on the Steelers, over on their roster in practice, he might earn some playing time. He might get some pass rushing opportunities. So good for the undrafted kid to get a chance on a good team.
Definitely keep an eye on some of the guys that'll be replacing TJ Watt if you're in an IDP league, and see if there's anybody that comes out of that could be grabbing a couple sacks in these few weeks. That's a name to watch out for. But some other not fantasy related news I just wanted to throw out here. The NFL has finished its research on the Guardian caps that were used on their players on the offensive, defensive line, and I believe tight ends as well in the preseason. If you hadn't seen, didn't know what they were, there were just pads that were worn on top of the helmets. You probably definitely saw pictures on social media or through practices. It did, in fact, help cut down concussions in the preseason by more than half, actually, at those positions, from 23 in 2021 to 11 this year. So probably something you're going to see as a practice staple moving forward, if I had to guess.
Yeah, I think you will. I think it's good for the game. I know not all the players liked it because they were like, we're going to get used to them being on our head, and then we're going to make contact without them, and it's going to actually be worse. So far, the early results are, but we'll have to do some more testing, and the NFL will, not us. We're not doing the testing on is multi-years to see if this is just an anomaly or it continues. But guys, that's all the news, because news is heavy on our Tuesday show. So why don't we jump into a week 2 preview?
Guys, thanks again for listening. And the support for the Couch GMs podcast is brought to you by Manscaped. It's the best in men's below the waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision engineered tools for your family jewels. Manscaped recently launched the Ultimate Men's Hygiene Bundle, the Performance Package. And guys, join over 5 million men worldwide, including all of us Couch GMs who trust Manscaped, with this exclusive offer to you: 20% off and free worldwide shipping with the code CouchGMs. That's CouchGMS at manscaped.com. Listen, the performance package is amazing. It's included with a bunch of different items that will really help the family jewels downstairs. You can get the Lawnmower 4.0, which is a trimmer. Look, guys, I'm not going to lie. I've had times where I decided to do a little shaving down there, but one thing you don't realize is you drip some hair on the floor, and then someone comes home and they're like, why is there hair on the floor? Where'd this come from? And you got to try to make up some weird excuse. The Lawnmower 4.0 is waterproof, so you can actually shave in the shower now. You can just let all that evidence go right down the drain. You can be looking great without having to have any weird explanations. But my favorite product is the Crop Preserver. I got it right here with me. This is a ball deodorant, but it's also a anti-chafer. So it's a lotion that you can put on. Listen, we're guys, we're active. We like to run. We like to play sports. Maybe you're playing some pickup football with the guys. You're sweating a lot. Sometimes you start to smell. You can put some deodorant in your armpits, but sometimes you start to smell a little bit south, and you don't really have anything for that. That's what the crop preserver's for. It's to make sure that if you're hanging out with your girl afterwards, or she's your cheerleader on the sidelines for you, you go over, you talk to her. She's not going to be smelling anything funky. But also, it's an anti-chafer. I got some big thighs. They rub together. Chafing is the worst. You start chafing, you start hurting. Makes your entire day uncomfortable. It makes everything you're doing uncomfortable. I recently just went to the beach. We walked the entire boardwalk. I put the crop preserver on before I went down. I did not chafe once. It was the most comfortable I felt. I'm no longer afraid to say yes to a long walk, to a hike, to going out and doing something that might cause some chafing, because I got the crop preserver now and it has reduced everything for me. We need to make sure we are feeling fresh, looking fresh. Best way to do that is manscaped.com. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code CouchGMs at manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com. Use the code CouchGMs. CouchGMS. Unlock your confidence and always use the right tools for the job with Manscaped.
Starting off our week 2 preview with the 1 o'clock window, and it's the Miami Dolphins traveling to the Baltimore Ravens. And interesting running back news coming out of Baltimore. J.K. Dobbins was a full participant in practice both Wednesday and Thursday, is expected to suit up, but we don't know how many snaps he's going to get. That's the only question.
Yeah, that's a huge question. Go ahead, Snyder.
It is a huge question. I'm just going to say, I think this week is filled with questionable running backs. I think you have your top guys that you're going to start no matter what. But a lot of your top guys, have injuries they're battling or really struggled in week 1. You have some lower guys you weren't planning on starting that may have broken out in week 1, and some free agent guys. Like this week's really questionable for which running backs to start. I know across my leagues I'm having some questions on which guys to throw in there.
Definitely. And if you have questions, you can reach out to us, just like a fan of the show. Her name is Brianna. God, don't tell her I said it 2 different ways. She's going to get so mad at me. But
she'll hear it on the show, so that's a good start.
She'll hear it, and she'll tweet us at that too. But she has J.K. Dobbins, and she has another running back that is struggling or didn't have the best week 1 in Damian Harris. So what do you guys think on Damian Harris versus Pittsburgh? I know we haven't gotten to that game yet, or J.K. Dobbins in his first game back. And if you didn't hear in his interview, not only did he tear his ACL, he tore his LCL, he tore his meniscus, and he tore his hamstring. So a lot of muscles that had to be reconstructed and regrown and re-strengthened. That's why it's taken so long. But J.K. Dobbins, Damian Harris, what do you guys got?
I am leaning Damian Harris. I feel like I would go the other way if Ramondre Stevenson was more effective in week 1, but not only did Harris get 1 more touch than him, he almost doubled him in yards per carry. So I think that kind of earns him the main role, maybe 60% of those touches in this week. I don't love the bad matchup, but I don't trust that J.K. Dobbins is going to get more carries than he is. So I'll take the guy who is up to speed just for this week, and probably you'll start seeing J.K. working in my lineups in the next few weeks.
Yeah. Pittsburgh Steelers defense was pretty stout in week 1, creating turnovers left and right. They did destroy the Bengals offensive line. Now you could say that's because of the Bengals offensive line, or you could say it's because of the Steelers defensive line. I know TJ Watt got injured, but they created just as much havoc after TJ Watt got injured. So Steelers against the Patriots, I don't like the Patriots odds on running the football effectively. I know J.K. Dobbins is limited, but I also don't trust Damian Harris at all. I feel like J.K. Dobbins might get the same amount of carries as Damian Harris, because even though he might be limited with the injury, Harris is going to be in a basically 50-50 split. If they're both getting the same amount of carries, run first offense in Baltimore Ravens, who are good at designing plays, give me J.K. Dobbins.
All right. Well, that means I get the luxury of splitting the tie here, and I do not want to be in this position. I should have talked quicker and faster and gave my thoughts at the beginning. But my whole thing is I hear what Tyler's saying, but I'm gonna have to lean Damon Harris. I don't love it at all, but just because we don't know the full extent of J.K. Dobbins, is he going to be on a 10 touch pitch count? Is he going to be less than 10? Is he going to be on like a 20 play? Not even meaning he's going to get the ball. There's just so much unknown and so much recovery that he's gone through, that I would hold him out another week. And the Dolphins also have a formidable front. They did just hold the Patriots to under 70 rushing yards as a team last week as well. So they're not a walk in the park positive matchup either. So I guess I would take the guy that I think might play more. It's not great matchup. But, I was going to ask this question to you guys earlier in the week, but I wanted to wait for the show. Speaking of J.K. Dobbins, and I'm sure there's people out there with J.K. Dobbins, but they also spent the most fab or got their money or got their waiver priority to get up a Jeff Wilson, who didn't look the best, but is projected to be the lead back. Are you playing him over J.K. Dobbins?
Circling back to your last statement, you said the Dolphins did have a great front and did hold the Patriots to 70 rushing yards. Let's just mention that it is week one. As good as a defense may look, a lot of times it can be a bad offense. Same with as good as an offense can look, it can be a bad defense. It's a small sample size. It's only 1 week, so we don't know. So that could say just as much about the Patriots' run game as it does the Dolphins' run defense. But going to your question, J.K. Dobbins or Jeff Wilson, look, I think the easy answer on the outside would be Jeff Wilson. He's taking over as the lead back. He should get plenty of carries. J.K. Dobbins is limited. However, I've watched the 49ers way too many times to know I don't trust this single running back in that system. Every time there's an injury at running back and you think you know exactly who's going to step in, it's someone completely different. Like we mentioned on our last show, feel free to go back and listen to what we said. The 2 or 3 potential options that might take over at running back for San Francisco, it would not surprise me one bit if some random guy we haven't heard of gets called up off the practice squad and he gets, 25 touches. It wouldn't surprise me because that's the kind of thing the 49ers do. I don't trust J.K. Dobbins' injury, but I trust him more than the 49ers sticking with a running back. So give me Dobbins.
I am not too far off from you because I feel like this is exactly a repeat of week 2 of last year when Raheem Mostert went down and we're like, Trey Sermon is the guy. And Elijah Mitchell ended up being the guy. It wasn't even Wayne Gallman, who was technically considered running back 3. So now I'm really in on this Jordan Mason train because he is the exact guy that Eli Mitchell was last year. The guy who was drafted later than the other running back in that system. Or this guy, like Mason, was actually an undrafted free agent, but still, he's been impressing more in camp. The Niners like to give those guys touches. So I'm going J.K. Dobbins because I'm not confident enough to short Jordan Mason, but I would rather start Jordan Mason than Jeff Wilson if I really have to throw a Hail Mary.
Interesting. I guess I'd be the only one that would go Jeff Wilson, just not trusting J.K. Dobbins yet. And just it is worth noting that it was Elijah Mitchell was the number 1 pickup that people were spending because that's who came in second after Mostert went down, and it was Jeff Wilson. Whether that remains the same. But we got to talk about this actual matchup against the Dolphins. We spent enough time on just J.K. Dobbins alone. Dolphins side, sit Mike Gesicki, start Waddle, and you can start Tyreek Hill. The running backs, if you want to start Chase Edmonds, if you're in the area where you need to play him, I think it's a fine matchup. It's not the best. It's not the worst. And then on the Ravens side, the big question is Devin Duvernay. Are you chasing the points? Or are you going to let him sit on your roster or your bench?
I picked him up in 1 or 2 leagues as kind of a depth piece, but I haven't found a league where I'm comfortable starting him over some of those fringe guys yet. So I'd rather see another week out of him. Rashad Bateman, I do have starting in 1 league though, so I feel like I want to keep building off of him. Like I'd still have him as a potential flex option if you need it, but Duvernay, I'm kind of waiting another week. I was just trying to get 1 week ahead of the guys when they really try to get him off the waiver wire.
It's weird for me to say this because I am a guy that went out and got Devin Duvernay in 2 separate dynasty leagues this offseason because I had a sneaky feeling that Duvernay was getting slept on and he was going to be a good option this year. But even with that being said, after seeing a good week 1, I'm still in a let's wait and see. kind of situation. Um, Look, every year there's guys that break out in week one and we're like, crap, let's pick them up real quick. And I'd say out of those guys, maybe 50% of the time, they do end up being big key assets all year long, if that. A lot of times it is a 1 week fluke. You know that people are scouting your team, they're expecting one thing, so you throw another curveball. Um, don't buy in super hard to what happens in week one and expect it to carry over. Anyway, so going back to something else I was going to say, my last point on this matchup is Cody, you said to sit Mike Gesicki. I'm going as far as to say drop Mike Gesicki. I like Mike Gesicki a lot. I think he's one of the most talented tight ends in the league. And if you're in, a 12 or 14 team league, maybe you can hang on to him if it's, a 2 tight end league or something weird like that. Sure, hang on to him. But in a standard 10 team, 1 tight end league, I'm saying drop Mike Gesicki. I don't think he's going to get the touches he needs. I don't think he's going to get the volume he needs. He was a good target in preseason, but I think he proved it in week one that I know I said don't buy in too much to week one, but we were a little sketchy on if he was going to get targets. He didn't get them in week one. I think there's other fringe tight ends that in a pinch you can pick up that'll be just as valuable or more than Gasecki.
Yeah, I agree. You can cut him. I said sit because he is one of the sit candidates on the start sit article on the couchgms.com. So make sure you check that out. If you have some questions, your guys might be on that list. But we can jump into the next matchup. We spent enough time on the Ravens, Dolphins, Jets, Browns. Did this team always play week 2 of the season? Like, I feel like every year, week 2, it's Jets, Browns.
I don't know.
Usually
How
it's
do
like
they keep
Thursday night
lining
football,
up?
though.
Yeah, it's always
That's
like the
very
first
true.
Thursday night game, I feel like. But this year we have the commitment to good Thursday night football. So they get the 1 o'clock slot. Let's start with the Jets. Because is there anybody that you really want to start? I know we're going to talk about the running backs, but what about the wide receivers?
Yeah, we were talking about Elijah Moore, and there's also rookie Garrett Wilson who made some clutch catches. He looked good, but yet still the leading receiver was Corey Davis. And the fact that we are mentioning 3 different receivers for a team that you don't usually want one asset from, that's a bad sign. So, with that being said, I wouldn't start any of the Jets receivers. If by week 3, week 4, maybe even week 5, you see Garrett Wilson start to take an edge, or Elijah Moore start to take an edge, or even Corey Davis keeps up being the number 1 for this team, then maybe you can start starting one of those guys. Till then, I'm out.
I'm pretty much with you, especially because right in that group with Devin Duvernay, like we were talking about, Elijah Moore is right around that spot as well, and I haven't found a situation where I want to start Elijah Moore this week either. But I think I'm going to like those guys a lot better when it's not Flacco. Like the offense might completely flip too. Like you might see Corey Davis being the guy with Flacco in there, and as soon as Zach Wilson comes back in week 4 or 5 or whatever it is, maybe it's going to switch over to Elijah Moore. You don't really know. So this is going to be a wait and see kind of wide receiver room, but there's a lot of talent on it, so you can't really completely give up on it, despite the Jets not being the most prolific offense.
Yeah, and if you have to start Elijah Moore, Elijah Moore. I was thinking Elijah Mitchell from the last one, but if you have to start Elijah Moore, just know I'm in a league with you, in a dynasty league where I am starting Elijah Moore. But one trend we started to notice in week 1 was some of these running backs were, being outplayed by guys drafting later than them. So we're going to talk about most of them, guys stealing touchdowns, and we're going to start it here with the Jets running backs. Michael Carter appeared to be the number 1 running back, at least in week 1. We've talked about how week 1 sometimes is an anomaly. Over Breece Hall, who was drafted ahead of him. Any concerns about Breece Hall moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I like that Breece Hall finally came alive in the second half. Um, by halftime, he was at like -1 points, and he ended up with 7. So um, I'm glad that he did come alive. He did get utilized, and I think that's the big thing is that he is going to get utilized. But Michael Carter had a great year last year, um, and now following it up with a great week 1 to start this year, and he's still young and talented. It's not like some older guy that's still like eating some carries, but he's on his way out. Like this is another young guy, so. I think it's going to be kind of a 50-50 split moving forward. And anytime you say 50-50 split, it makes you kind of question both guys.
Yeah, and I think Brees Hall is going to get better as the season goes on because he's going to get up to game speed, kind of what you said. But if there's a week, 2, 3 weeks to start Michael Carter, if you're in a desperate running back situation, this is your window right here. I mean, Cleveland, the matchup against Cleveland, maybe not the greatest, but actually, the weirdest thing about it all, Michael Carter was the leader in receptions for the Jets last week. He wasn't the leader in targets, that was Corey Davis, but leader in receptions was Michael Carter. So they're not just getting him used in the run game, it's the pass game too. So if you're in a half PPR or PPR, this is your window to play Michael Carter.
Yeah, the only thing is Brees Hall had more targets than Michael Carter. Obviously, he didn't catch
They
as
were
many
actually
because he didn't
tied.
have. I thought it was 10 for, and he led all running backs in targets.
Oh, I mean, I have it as 9, so maybe at either way, it's pretty close. But
yeah, so very close. I had it at 10. Brees Hall led, so maybe ESPN versus NFL versus Pro
maybe.
Football Reference, or one of them had it as a backwards pass or something. But still very similar. But I think Michael Carter is, going to eat away at Brees Hall, but I think Brees Hall does take over as the season progresses. But the Browns, great defensive streaming option if you need a defense.
Mm-hmm.
But after what we saw, Amari Cooper, Donovan Peoples-Jones, you got the 2 running backs. They're both can be every week starters. We don't have to talk about them. But is there any wide receivers for the Browns you want to play?
Nope.
Donovan Peoples-Jones dominated in targets, and I don't like it. No.
Yep, I'm right there with you. So let's just. Anything else? You guys want to move on?
I'm good. Let's go.
Poor Amari Cooper owners. That's all I got to say.
For sure. That'd be a great, panic button question down the line if he continues this one. But
Yes.
The next matchup, the surprise Washington Commanders that came out and beat the Jags. I don't know if that's a surprise, but Carson Wentz actually looked good versus the Detroit Lions, who just hung around with the Eagles the whole game. Never got put away. Made that game a lot closer than it needed to be. I want to start with the Commanders and Carson Wentz. Or should I say QB3 in week 1, Carson Wentz. That I'm willing to say if you need a streaming option, if you're a late round quarterback or if you had a Dak and you need to go get a guy against the Detroit Lions, I think you can go out, start, pick up Carson Wentz.
I'm in a league where I have Dak, and I did pick up Carson Wentz, and he is my starting quarterback this week. So I'm right there with you, Cody. 100% agree.
Yeah, this week, I got you. I'm with you. I think he's more of a matchup-based starter. So anyone that picked him up that is thinking Carson Wentz is back, play him every week, pump the brakes a little bit. But you should get a good week this week against the Lions. I mean, the Eagles put up 38, and we don't consider them even, the most prolific offense in the NFL. So Washington should be fine.
But speaking of Washington, they had 3 different wide receivers that were involved. Curtis Samuel was a big, waiver acquisition. Jahan Dotson, if he wasn't, he was also on the waiver wires if he wasn't already grabbed. And then you still have Terry McLaurin, who people still drafted pretty high. Are you confident playing all 3 of them? Is there any ones you don't want to play?
I am worried a little bit about Terry McLaurin because he was 4th or 5th on the team in targets. And I think he's going to be fine because he is a talented receiver. He's a 1-play touchdown waiting to happen. But I think I'm most confident in starting Curtis Samuel this week, which kind of sounds crazy. But I kind of saw some whispers coming out of Washington right before the season started that the person who was running the most diverse route tree, the person who was being used in the most, kind of gadget plays was Curtis Samuel, and no one had him drafted. And all of a sudden, week 1, he comes out and does that, and maybe there's something to it.
Yeah, these Washington wide receivers, I mean, for any of my poker players out there, they're like a pair of 9s. It's like they're good enough that you're like, I can play them if I need to, but you're not thrilled about it. You're not like, oh, I'm definitely going to win with these. Like, they're like, I guess. Like, yeah, sure, put it in. Like, that's what the Washington receivers are to me. I think that they have the potential to put up some points. If you pick the right one, you'll probably get some good points, but it's no receiver that I'm thrilled about throwing into my lineup.
Pair of 9s, I like it.
Pair of 9s. I'm going to end on that. I'm not even going to talk about them. I'm going to flip over to the Detroit side. And I think the big storyline, if it is a storyline, is DeAndre Swift has not practiced all week. Now, reminder, we are recording this on Thursday, so he might be able to practice on Friday when the final injury report comes out. He himself has said he's fine, but we have seen in the past before players say they're good to go and teams hold them out. So make sure you check your waiver wires and see if Jamal Williams, who was already stealing touchdowns from he could be a spot start if you need a guy and DeAndre Swift doesn't go. But I'll
Yes.
ask you guys, are you guys concerned, or do you think this is just because he has an injury history in the past? Like, I'd pick up Jamal Williams even if he does play just because of
Mhm.
his injury past at this point.
I mean, I think Jamal Williams is still semi-widely owned because he was drafted in most leagues near the end. But I think I'm just trusting the process. If they say that they're just resting Swift and he's going to be good to go, I'm playing him because he's almost a cheap version of a CMC. If he plays, he's putting up points. But if he doesn't play, maybe start of the week is Jamal Williams, just from a value-based standpoint.
26.4% owned on NFL.com leagues. So there's actually a lot
It's
of
lower than
leagues
I
out
thought.
there. 75% of leagues out there, he's available. So make sure I'd go grab him.
Especially
And
if
then,
you're DeAndre Swift owner. Like, don't let
Mm-hmm.
somebody else steal Jamal from you next week on the waiver wire if Swift goes down this week or ends up not playing. Snag him now. But no, I am always worried about injuries. But that's the thing. I mean, there's certain players that you have to kind of worry about their injury history, just like CMC. But just like we talked about last season, if you didn't listen then, listen up now. Like, if you live based off of fear of injury, you're not going to win in fantasy because that's the thing. We see players I know I always go back to the Titans, but Derrick Henry has missed one game his entire career before last season with injury. Most in shape guy ever. Most you can rely on Henry all season because he's always healthy. He went down for half the season. You can't just live hoping that, based off of injuries. You can't just fear it. You can't expect your guys to get hurt. Injuries can happen to anybody. It's a contact sport. So just be ready to roll with the punches, and whatever does happen, have a backup plan in place.
that's great advice. And the last thing about the Lions is Amon-Ra St. Brown in week 1 continued right where he left off at the end of last season. He is their number 1 target. He saw 12 targets in week 1. So you can roll him out as a flex wide receiver 2 option, in my opinion. Any rebuttals, or are you guys ready to move on?
Do you want me to throw you a start sit question really fast?
Sure, absolutely. Love those.
All right. Amon-Ra St. Brown or Jerry Jeudy, who also had a fairly solid week 1.
All right, let me double check.
Jeudy against Houston, and then obviously we have Amon-Ra against Washington.
My gut right now is telling me Amon-Ra.
Okay.
But I've been the lowest of the 3 of us on Jeudy all off season. So there,
when push came to shove, Jeudy was clutch. I feel like Jeudy was more readily apparent in the game than Cortland Sutton was this past week. So I like Jeudy.
That's very true.
I think Russ is going to come out pissed and have something to prove, which is what I thought they would do in week 1, but preseason week 4. So I think Judy's going to have a big week.
Yeah, Jeudy has that big playability. I think Amon-Ra will be the safer option. Like, I think he has a higher floor. But if you need a big swing or a big play, go for Jerry Jeudy.
I wish I was in a league where I had to bench one of those 2.
Yeah. It's our league of
leagues
record,
are you
so
in?
thank you.
Oh, yeah, just rub it in.
It's our league of record,
All
yeah.
right, next matchup. The Colts get to take on another division opponent. Will they tie? We'll have to wait and see. But they could be without their number 1 guy, as Michael Pittman Jr. went from limited on Wednesday to DNP on Thursday. So whether this is just a rest day, another injury you have to be closely monitoring on Friday, or you can stay tuned in to the Couch GMs Twitter account. We tweet out inactives and injury updates on days that we're not recording. Concerns about Pittman not playing, and then following that up, would you play any other wide receivers if he doesn't play?
I think next... Oh, go ahead, Tyler. Go ahead.
Go ahead, George.
Okay. He's not confident about this, and I don't think I am either. I have a feeling that the DNP was them resting Pittman, so he's going to be good to go, but we'll know more on Friday, so we'll keep you up to date on Twitter. But if he doesn't go, the only other guy I'd even think about is Paris Campbell, and he's shown flashes in his career. He just has trouble staying on the field. I feel like I have to play one wide receiver, even though I'm not confident, just because the matchup is so juicy, and Ryan's going to get passing yards to someone. So if you're desperate for a flex, Paris Campbell would be my guy, but I hope you have a better bench option.
So I'm on a Facebook group that is AFC South Fan Battle. It's literally just people who are fans of the AFC South teams just talking trash on each other. And I love that for years it was, oh yeah, just keep running Henry 30 times a game. You're just going to run him into the ground, ruin his career. Jonathan Taylor had 31 carries last week. And I'm telling you right now, if Michael Pittman doesn't play, he's going to get 40 this week. I feel like if Pittman doesn't play, they're just going to use more Jonathan Taylor. They're going to throw more to Jonathan Taylor. Maybe they'll get Nyheim Hines more involved in the passing game.
Mhm.
But I don't see a single receiver in there that I'm like, yeah, I think this is the guy I'm going to put in place. If Pittman does go, I mean, the dude had 121 yards on 13 targets and a touchdown last week. Granted, it's against the Texans, but this is the Jags, so it's not like it's that much different.
Pretty much.
If Pittman is healthy, I feel like you got to play him just because of the volume that he does get. But if Pittman doesn't play, only Colt I want is Jonathan Taylor. I don't want anybody else.
Yeah, I'm with you. And the only person I would add in there is the guy you just mentioned, Nyheim Hines. He did have 6 catches on 6 targets, 50 yards. Pittman doesn't go, and you're in a pinch at running back. If Pittman plays, ignore what I'm saying. But if he doesn't go, and you're in a pinch, Nyheim Hines might be worth an option, and then just having 2 startable running backs. But I'm out on everyone else for the Colts besides Pittman if he goes. We are on the Jags. They played the Texans last week. The name I do want to talk about, though, for them is Christian Kirk. The guy was paid like a number 1 wide receiver, and in week 1, he was used like a number 1 wide receiver. Double-digit targets, over 100 yards. He has, at least for me, definitely a flexible option, wide receiver 2 if you need it. Until proven otherwise, he is their clear-cut number 1 option.
I'm with you. I don't have anything to argue there.
Zay Jones was surprisingly heavily used for the Jags.
They paid him a weird amount, too.
I can't take Zay Jones seriously since the Raiders incident with Cody, where he's like, I maybe can pick that guy up. Oh, just kidding. It's Zay Jones.
Yeah, no, Zay Jones. It's weird that he's getting used so heavily, but yeah, Christian Kirk, I think he's a startable option, especially against the Colts. I don't think they're that stout on defense, so still don't love it. I really don't want a Jaguar. I mean, I think what we really need to talk about is these running backs, because like we said, there was a trend of backup running backs outperforming starters, and last week we saw the same thing. James Robinson, 11 carries for 66 yards and a touchdown. Travis Etienne, 4 carries for 47 yards.
It's a solid yards per carry average there, actually.
11.8.
In the passing game, Etienne did get more targets than James Robinson, but he did have like an ugly drop. Didn't really do much with the receptions. I don't know. Do you trust any of these running backs?
I'd still roll Etienne out there. I know that might sound crazy. It may just be because of where I had him preseason ranking, but he dropped a walk-in touchdown. He had, and obviously wouldn't have kept up with 11.8 yards per carry, but the Achilles is such a hard injury to come back for. So far, it looks good for James Robinson, but it is week 1. It's a long season. So if I had to pick one, I'd still start Travis Etienne, especially against the Colts, who are pretty stout up front. We'll see if they get Shaquille Leonard back. And if you don't know who Shaquille Leonard is, it's Darius Leonard, but he goes by his middle name now. So it took me a while to figure that one out there. So I'm sure there's other people doing that as well. So with them out up front and him being more of a pass catcher, I would roll with Etienne. But I feel like George is going to tell me why it should be James Robinson.
Etienne,
I'm going to tell you.
Too.
Yes. But I'm just saying James Robinson also should be your goal line guy. So if I'm confident with them going out there and throwing him in like another 11, 12, 13 carries, and I know he has a chance to get a little 1-yard touchdown dive, that can make a solid fantasy day pretty much every week. So I am with the people that were going for the hard waiver rush for Robinson. I am with having him as a potential flex if you're desperate. Don't go and force him into your lineup, but I think that touchdown potential and the fact that they seem to want to use him even in week 1 when he wasn't supposed to play shows that there is a role in this offense for him.
Well, I'm still saying like Etienne, borderline play, Christian Kirk, a wide receiver 2 or flex option, Jonathan Taylor, Pittman if he's healthy. Is there anybody else worth talking about here, or should we move on? I'm excited to get to the next matchup because I got a start sick question I want to ask.
All right, then let's just get right into it. It is Buccaneers Saints. The Saints have always beat the Tom Brady-led Buccaneers. Does that trend continue? But before we get into the matchup, just hit us with that start sit question. I'm too excited now.
All right, I got 3 wide receivers for you.
Okay.
I need a wide receiver too. We got the emergence of Julio Jones with no Chris Godwin. That's why this matchup brought it up. We got Darnell Mooney, disappointing in week 1, but it was the rain game. He is the number 1 receiver going against a team that just allowed 1,000 yards to the number 1 receiver, Green Bay Packers. And my other option is the rookie who looked good in week 1, Drake London. And he's going against the Los Angeles Rams. So Drake London, Julio Jones, Darnell Mooney. Who do you start?
I'm going to go Julio Jones, especially because we didn't even get to it on the rundown yet. Evans is hurt too. He was a limited participant Wednesday, did not practice Thursday. He might follow the Michael Pittman route and, end up coming back and playing anyway. But the fact that Julio Jones could be a wide receiver 1 on a Tom Brady team and he looked good week 1 already, I'm okay with that. Your wide receiver 2.
Well, that's if Julio Jones plays, because he has also been DNP Wednesday and Thursday. Chris Godwin has been DNP. Russell Gage was DNP, then limited. Rashad Perryman, if you all remember him from like 2 years ago, we had a dollar bet on that guy when he was back with the Lions.
Now limited. Dollar, by the way.
I'm sure I gave you your dollar eventually. Probably just Venmo you one less dollar. That's besides the point. But to answer your question, I am torn because I want to say Julio Jones, but the not practicing after looking so good does scare me after he played in 13 games last year, but only finished 4 or 5 of them, whatever that crazy number was. Darnell Mooney, it was the rain game, like you mentioned. I have a hard time seeing the Packers give up another 180 yards to number. And Darnell Mooney is no Justin Jefferson. That's not a knock on Darnell Mooney. That's just how good Justin Jefferson is. But that could be the fan inside of me. And then Drake London, he did look good, but they didn't really get Kyle Pitts involved. So will they try to overcorrect that and get him involved this week? So it's definitely a tough question. So off the top of my head, I'm going to go Julio number 1, only if he plays, obviously. And then I'm going to follow that up with I'm going to go with Darnell Mooney and then Drake London. Those are pretty much a coin flip. Which matchup do you like better? Because, week 1, Jalen Ramsey also gave up a boatload of yards. Do we expect that again? And that's who the Falcons play. But that's my top 3 or my ranking.
All right, fair enough. I guess we could talk about the other guys in this matchup. We got, like we said, Bucks and Saints. We just mentioned all the injuries on the Bucks side. Playoff Lenny. Do we like Playoff Lenny as a starter? We still moving with him?
Yeah, he's a starter for sure.
Unfortunately.
Obviously, you're going to have to monitor the injuries. If Mike Evans is a go, you're starting Mike Evans. You drafted him high enough. Julio Jones is a play this week, like we just mentioned. Is there anybody else on the Bucks side of the ball that you are playing?
I mean, if everyone's hurt and he plays Perryman, if he ends up being the number 1, number 2, but I have a hard time going further than that on the depth chart to a Scotty Miller or a Jalen Darden.
Yeah, I'm out on those guys. I'm probably actually out on Tom Brady too, with all the injuries, the offensive line struggles going against the Saints, who have had his number the last couple of years. I'd probably try to find a different streaming option. It's crazy to think that I'd play Carson Wentz over Tom Brady, but I would. I said it. Clip it. I don't care. But yeah, that's where I'm at with the Buccaneers. And on the Saints side, Kamara is dealing with the back injury, which is scary. They did sign Latavius Murray as some insurance there. They still have Mark Ingram. So they're just getting the old band back together from a few years ago. So that's a name to watch. If he doesn't go, I'm not playing Mark Ingram or Latavius Murray. Oh. I don't like those guys enough if Kamara doesn't go. Some people might think that's crazy, but that's just where I'm at with that one. And then Jarvis Landry showed that he could be in your lineup. He's the number 1 target for now.
Son of a B. Are we starting Taysom Hill at tight end?
No. That was one big play.
I mean, I feel like the Saints show you every year that, Taysom Hill is going to get utilized. And we're talking about guys like Mike Gesicki is getting less than 1 point in games. So really no love for Taysom Hill? You're not even picking him up?
Nope.
Man, I'd rather start Jonnu Smith.
Okay.
Exactly.
I don't. Yeah. Ooh. We're not doing that statistic question right now because they're both
Because if
sick.
you're starting to sit in that, I don't know what's up with your waiver wire, but people are stashing tight end somewhere.
All right, but you brought up Jonnu Smith, so let's talk about the Patriots and the Steelers matchup real quick. We talked about a little bit with T.J. Watt, his injury. Najee Harris is banged up, but he says he'll play. Mac Jones is banged up, and he says he'll play if you want to play a quarterback against the Steelers defense. Another one, the Steelers defense weren't that owned because they're playing the Bengals week 1, so that's another stream of the week if you didn't grab them on the waiver wire. There's not this used to be like a pristine matchup, and there is not a lot of players I like in fantasy outside of the Steelers and Deontay Johnson because he gets all the targets still, and Pat Freiermuth because he's number 2 in targets. Those 2 guys, but that's it for this matchup. I mean, if you got to play Damian Harris over J.K. Dobbins like we talked about, I'm sorry, but what are you guys' thoughts? It's a pretty easy matchup for me.
Look, man, I think you mentioned all that we need to mention. So before we move on, I just want to tell you one quick fun thing. So every year we find some like stupid fantasy league rules that just blow our mind or stupid fantasy league formats. I joined a free league with some family members this year. They were like, "Hey, you want to join?" I always should say no. I said yes. I just want you to know how dumb the scoring is. All quarterbacks, running backs, receivers get the same amount of points as they normally do. Full PPR, but no extra bonus points. You know how many points the Steelers defense got in this league last week, though?
I don't even want to guess.
73 points. That's how dumb the scoring is in this league. So yeah, I picked
Do
them
you even
up.
know why?
Nope. I haven't looked into it. It's just a ridiculous number. So guys out there, if you're listening, if you've seen some crazy, ridiculous scoring settings or league rules that you want to tell us about, please, I am all ears because these are hilarious to me, and I'm stuck in one now. So I'd like
Yeah,
to hear it.
let's see how long you last in that matchup. But we got one more matchup for the 1:00 games, and it's another one that we're probably going to breeze right through. The Carolina Panthers versus the New York Giants. Let's start on the Giants side. Saquon Barkley.
Yep.
Okay.
Is there anyone
Anybody
else on
else?
that offense?
People
I
are picking
mean,
up Sterling Shepard. I wouldn't start him.
if they would just play Kadarius Toney, I feel like he is athletic enough and fun enough that he could get points, but they don't like playing him for some reason. All right, the Panthers, a little bit more interesting. You got CMC, you're definitely playing him. Robbie Anderson was the number 1 target in week 1. Good matchup against the Giants. You still have DJ Moore, which I think you're playing DJ Moore because he can take a touchdown from anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Still like him. But Robbie Anderson, is he flexible this week?
In the matchup? Yeah, why not?
Sure.
Dude, that was so much confidence. But
I mean,
right
it's still Robbie Anderson. I feel like we have a sour taste in our mouth about who Robbie Anderson is as a player after last year's just collapse. But we know he's got it too, so it's possible.
Yeah, and then last question, Ian Thomas, he had a pretty nice day. If you're desperate for tight ends, are you making that reach?
Dartboard.
Yep.
All right. Let's move to 4:00. We get some better matchups there, but it's not this one. The Falcons at the Rams. This actually might be a good matchup because the Rams did not look great in the opener, and the Falcons looked surprisingly good. But we mentioned Drake London. He looked pretty well. Kyle Pitts, he's still in your lineup. The guy I want to talk about, and I'm going to finally admit it, Cordarrelle Patterson is a good running back. I don't understand why it's taking me so long to admit it. But he's on my starts of the week. I know it's the Rams, but he did it on the ground last week. He had double-digit carries, over 100 yards, and he only had 1 target and still had a solid fantasy day. And he is the pass catcher if this team gets behind. They love Cordarrelle Patterson. They unlock something with him. So Cordarrelle Patterson, RB2, put him in your starting lineups.
So how long can he do this at his age, getting that many carries? Like, I'm just saying.
Oh, he'll probably stop now that I finally admitted it.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, even if not, now that you finally admitted it, like last year we saw him wear down, and then in the fantasy playoffs he was not as effective. He was still decent, but he wasn't the Cordarrelle Patterson we saw at the beginning. But people start to freak out about anyone at the running back position over 28, and now this guy, I believe, what is he, 30? and now all of a sudden he's going to start getting 20 carries a game and somehow look good. I just don't see it being able to be carried on. So sure, play him now, but the long-term outlook still scares me when it comes to him.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I mean, it was scary to admit that I think he is actually a good fantasy running back, but I just did it. If you're on YouTube right now, you do notice a black square over Tyler. He'll be right back with us, just dealing with a little bit of technical difficulties. But George and I will hold down the fort until he's back as we talk about the Los Angeles Rams. Another running back, Cam Akers, was completely outplayed by Darrell Henderson. Now, we heard he was good to go, but there was always the speculations that he was still a little banged up coming back from injury. So it might not be a complete concern, but Henderson looked good. I still say Cam Akers does not have the same explosion he had torn Achilles. We'll see if he ever gets that back. Again, Achilles are super hard to come back from. I want to get your thoughts on the running backs, but I do want to add in Tyler Higbee is near the top of the dartboard with the amount of targets he got after week one and the lack of Allen Robinson.
Yeah, and I feel like Allen Robinson was a bit of a fluke too. Like he was still on the field. I think it was 97%
I'd still play him
of the
this week
snaps.
too.
Yeah, I mean the matchup is so much better. We forget that they were playing Buffalo. Stafford was struggling to find any receivers open that weren't named Cooper Kupp. Or I mean, Gerald Everett was not bad either. But like that's going to change once he has more time, when he's not running around all over the place because Buffalo's chasing him, because Buffalo's throwing weird schemes at him. Atlanta is not close to the defense that Buffalo has. So I like both of them in this matchup. But on the running back side, Henderson's your start. Like, sure. But I want to see how much Akers starts trying to eat into carries. I want to see if they start giving him more time on the field, because it sounds like he's in the doghouse even more than just the injury. Like they said they want to see more urgency from him. Like if he starts to show that he wants to be on the field, maybe he's going to start getting more opportunity, and maybe we just didn't get the chance to see him at full speed last week. I still think there's a good chance that he rebounds over the second half of the season and ends up being the lead back in that offense, because Henderson's not that special of a back. He's all right. He's going to be effective for you when you need him, but he's one of those guys that you just put into that, like, oh, he's a blind face, any kind of running back that can just get a hole and your offensive line does the work. Like that's how I view Henderson.
Gotcha. Real quick, two things. One, you said Gerald Everett. The guy's on the Ram, his name is Tyler Higbee. But you were just so impressed with Gerald Everett's performance on Thursday Night Football. It was a doozy. Another solid performance. So I understand why you messed that one up.
Yep.
But long-term output, rest of season, Cordarrelle Patterson or Darrell Henderson?
Cordarrelle Patterson, I guess. That's awful.
See, I picked Darrell Henderson, and so that's where there's at least a little bit of myself with Cordarrelle Patterson. Let's move on to the surprise winners of week one. Ruined a lot of survivor leagues. That would be the Seattle Seahawks versus the San Francisco 49ers. Also destroyed a lot of survivor leagues by losing to the Bears in the rain, the mud bowl, whatever you want to call it. Seattle, though, they looked decent, but there wasn't anybody that popped off the screen for me. We had all the same concerns with Tyler Lockett. He's still a guy that I'm fading away from. DK did seem to be the target, but Geno just wasn't pushing it down the field. It was a lot of short throws. So maybe Will Dissly finds his way to the tight end dartboard, but there's so many tight ends there that I'd probably avoid that. Seattle is still a team that there's not a person fantasy I'd want to play. If I have DK, I'd play him because his name is DK Metcalf, but I don't love it.
Okay, so I know there's a couple of situations where I've seen people have Rashad Penny because they figured he would be like the start of the season back for Seattle before you maybe see Kenneth Walker start to work in here in the next few weeks. And they also drafted J.K. Dobbins. Now that Dobbins is coming back here, and you got a tough matchup here against the 49ers to Seattle, I'll just throw another J.K. Dobbins start-sit question at you. Would it be him or Rashad Penny?
All right. That is a tough one. I'm trying to stall. I'm trying to feel, because I thought I read, and I want to confirm it before that Kenneth Walker is back practicing, which could mean he might get his debut this week, which means I'm still worried about it. He was a limited participant. Oh man, I guess
it's worth noting he was full on Wednesday and then came back to limited today.
Okay, so I would still go Rashad Penny, I
Mm-hmm.
think,
I think
over
very confident.
J.K. Dobbins. Um, I could flip a coin. I could put in a spinner wheel, random generator. I think I would go Rashad Penny just because we know that he can still put up 20 points a game on a bad offense. We saw him do it last year.
Yeah.
Um, J.K. Dobbins, there's still a lot of concern for me about J.K. Dobbins. Like, he might play just because, you know, in that interview that I was talking about, he mentioned like he's never played in a full M&T Bank Stadium because when he was drafted, it was the COVID year, and then there was no fans, and then he was hurt all last year. So they might just get him out there, get him a few carries. I'm not ready to play J.K. Dobbins yet, so there's not going to be really a guy that I find that I'm going to feel better about playing J.K. Dobbins in. But Rashad Penny was awfully close.
Yes, exactly. He still, I think, had like 6.5 points or something last week, in spite like that just couldn't get anything really going on that offense. I'm avoiding him unless it's a situation like that. But no, I think DK is the only guy in Seattle that I want to start. So we can move over to San Francisco, where I think Deebo Samuel is a heck of a play. Not you're going to bench him anyway, but I think he's going to get extra touches out of the backfield now. We kind of already hit those running backs. You seem to be the guy that's fairly confident in starting Jeff Wilson.
Yeah, I would start Jeff Wilson, but don't hear what I'm not saying. If you have a roster spot, go pick up Jordan Mason or go pick up
Mm-hmm.
Tyrion Davis Price. Like, one of them is going to be the guy. All the beat reporters so far have said it's going to be Jeff Wilson. We know Kyle Shanahan really likes Jeff Wilson. We saw that last year when he came back. They tried to get him involved until he got hurt again, but he's another guy that has injury history.
Yeah.
Goal line, I think he's also like their goal line guy for sure. So that's why I lean him. But make sure if you have the ability, or you probably don't at this point because waivers have already run, but if for some reason he slid through, go ahead and pick up Jordan Mason and or Tyrion Davis Prince.
Davis Price, but yeah, I got you. And
Yeah, I
then I
know.
guess
Game of
I guess
Thrones,
Brandon
Tyrion, I
Ayuk.
think Prince. I'm sorry.
It's fine.
Brandon Ayuk,
Brandon Ayuk.
that's another
Go
tough
ahead.
one. It's so hard because week one was that mud bowl. And like literally
Yep.
we tweeted out, we talked about it in our group chat. Like as soon as we saw it raining, we were like, we're out on all San Francisco 49ers and Bears players because like it's going to be such a terrible day.
Except
And
for
literally like,
Debo, I think you felt like he was the only one that would. And he didn't have a great game, but he did okay.
yeah. And Debo, he's still in your lineup. I think you can still roll out Trey Lance. I know it wasn't the best game for him in his debut, or not his debut, but like as the full-time starter. I think you still roll him. Ayuk, he's like borderline flex for me. You might have someone a little bit better, but it is a decent matchup. Now that Jamal Williams is out for the season for the Seattle Seahawks, we normally don't talk a lot about defensive players, but he is a big name in that secondary. They still have Quandre Diggs, who is a very good safety, but that was definitely a big loss for Seattle. And I also wonder, after the big win on Monday night, it's now a short week. They are traveling to San Francisco. Can they get rehyped, or will they kind of come
Yeah.
out slow and sluggish?
Especially
So
as Russell Wilson, there was a lot to get hype for week one.
exactly. So I think this might be an even bigger letdown for the Seahawks. So maybe you do want to slide in Brandon Ayuk just because you're expecting even less from Seattle, which honestly didn't know that was possible.
Yeah, because we weren't expecting much from Seattle coming in. Apparently, I guess the expectation went up a little bit. But all right, let's keep going here. We're going to go to the Cincinnati Bengals, who are another disappointing team in week one, going against an even more of a disappointment with the Dallas Cowboys. Cowboys defense held up very strong. It just didn't seem like it because the offense couldn't move the ball. So the Bengals just had a struggle game against the Steelers, who had a tough defense. Is there any worry again about the Bengals, or do you think that preseason week 4 is over and they're going to get moving?
I'm not worried about the Bengals. We even saw they should have won that game. They missed an extra point and a 29-yard field goal.
Yeah.
I know that doesn't do good for my boy Evan McPherson, which you can still start this week if you play in a league with kickers, but you shouldn't play fantasy football with kickers. But the concussion for T. Higgins is my big concern. And if he doesn't go, I know we can talk about Tyler Boyd, but I think if T. Higgins doesn't go, Hayden Hurst is a guy that you can put at the top of the tight end depth board. He was second in the league or second on the team in targets after T. Higgins went down. So a guy that Joe Burrow seemed to like, he got involved early. So Hayden Hurst on your waiver wire, you can go up and pick him up. And then Everyone else in
That
the
was
Bengals,
Tyler's guy, I think. So way to jump back in here in time.
Absolutely. I heard Hayden Hurst and I was like, what? And I jumped right back in. No, I like Hayden Hurst. I think he's a good third down target. He's going to pick up some targets with Higgins down. I mean, he was the guy I said to go pick him up on the waiver wire. Drop Gasecki for him. I don't care.
yeah, I'm with you. Drop Gasecki for Hayden Hurst. I would do that as well after he did. Oh, sorry. He had the third most targets behind Joe Mixon, who had 9. He had 8. Jamar Chase had 16. So he is the clear number 1.
132.
But on the Cowboys side, this is where it gets real interesting for me because they're going to play Cooper Rush as the starting quarterback. We talked about their offensive line. We already talked about how we don't like Zeke that much, but what is your line of where you're going to bench Zeke?
He was already, for the most part, a lower end running back 2 or a flex in a lot of the leagues that I ended up with him. Someone's going to have to do something in this offense. So I feel like Zeke is probably still right around that low end RB2 flex kind of, position. But it is definitely more sketchy. I know Tyler's hit it home multiple times how he struggled without Dak in the past, and I think it's going to continue, but he's going to be a volume monster. I think he actually got a couple of carries away from Tony Pollard last week. So because of the volume alone, you have to play him just hoping.
Yeah, it's not like Tony Pollard was stealing the touches and stealing the points from Zeke because Pollard didn't do anything either. But just to put put a name to it so you know where I feel Zeke is at. This might sound either really stupid or really smart because we do record on Thursday right before the games. But I am playing CEH over Zeke in my league of record.
Well, I mean, that's kind of a blessing that you have the ability to do that because a lot of people that took Zeke went kind of no running back because they thought that was a good value. So to be able to still play CH is lucky. I do think CeeDee Lamb is a big, fade guy. Obviously, you're going to play him because you draft him in the second round. He didn't fall from a wide receiver 1 to a flex, but just manage expectations. Dalton Schultz is the only guy that I don't think affects it too much because, as Tyler would love to remind us, and he's probably mad that I'm stealing what he's about to say, rookie quarterbacks and backup quarterbacks favor tight ends. So Dalton Schultz, I think, is still a play, still a guy that you can at least rely on. It's also a position that a lot of people are bad at. So if it's a bad week, most likely your opponent also had a bad week.
Absolutely, Cody. Hey, let's go ahead and move on to this next game. Let's keep it rolling here. We got the Houston Texans at the Denver Broncos. On the Texans side, if you have Brandon Cooks, you're probably playing him. He's still a pretty solid option. But other than that, there's really nobody else that you like playing here. But the big question is Dameon Pierce, the big preseason hype, didn't come to fruition in week 1. You guys rolling with Pierce, or is he right to your bench and waiting to see?
Wait and see if you can. If you drafted early enough for you got him on the waivers around 12 or 15, and you got guys that you can play. If you drafted later, right before the season started, and in one of those leagues where he was going round 3, round 4, you might not have a choice. At least Lovie Smith did say, along with Pep Hamilton, their offensive coordinator, they want to get him more involved. They know they need to get him more involved. But if you have the luxury of not playing him, make sure you see it before you believe it and bench Dameon Pierce.
I'm with you there, just especially because the matchup's not great either. And we have to remember Texans RB1s haven't exactly been fantastic over the years. I think the Texans are going to be a little better as an offense this year, but it's going to take time for Pierce to get up to NFL speed. But I think that pretty much wraps up your Texans. So going over to the Broncos side, you're starting Russell Wilson. I know we were talking about the Jerry Jeudy versus Courtland Sutton debate. Are both of them still in your lineups in what should be a plus matchup?
Yeah. I still like Courtland Sutton a little bit more, but they both had 7 targets in week 1. So they're pretty 50-50, and they both can be played.
Yeah, great, Cody.
All right, and then running backs really fast on Denver. So Melvin Gordon actually led the Denver Broncos in carries. He had 12. Javonte Williams had 7. And I'm going through here quick. Melvin Gordon with 2 targets, but Javonte Williams, 11. So they're kind of carving out their roles, I feel like, and I think there's a chance, especially in this matchup, both are startable.
Yeah, I think you can play both as well.
Both.
we saw Twitter did not like how much Melvin Gordon got involved in week 1. They were like, free Javonte, but they said it.
Javonte still did fine.
It's going to be a hot hand. It's going to be who's doing the best. So I think they can both be in your lineup.
And we'll hope that they don't fumble on the goal line this week, because they both did it last week, and that's the reason that Denver lost, besides maybe the penalties. But last 4 o'clock game here in the 4 o'clock window.
Why, but yes. Sorry.
Those are 2 of the big ones. Arizona Cardinals traveling to the Las Vegas Raiders. First start up with Zach Ertz, I guess, on the Cardinals side, because I was one of the many people that benched him because we thought he would be limited. And he ended up getting a touchdown late in the game, as well as another catch and getting 10 points. And it appears that he is on track to probably have a pretty full workload this week, because he's limited so far on Thursday.
Yeah, I think you can play Ertz. There's not, I guess you'll still roll out Kyler Murray. If you drafted him, you'll play him. But there wasn't a wide receiver that showed up in week 1. So, I mean, I'm not going to run out and start Greg Dortch, who led them in receptions and targets. Yeah, you can Google that name too. And I'm pretty sure I pronounced it correctly, which is an even bigger surprise for that one. So not too many on the Cardinals outside of Ertz and Murray for me.
Yep.
Well, that's exciting.
Moving on to the Raiders. Hunter Renfrow did not get as many targets as I was hoping. Devontae Adams pretty much just dominated everything.
Reminded you he's still the best receiver in the league.
Well, okay. Justin Jefferson.
He probably also led the league in targets with 17.
So Jamar. That's a debate for another day. Anyway, Devontae Adams, obviously, you're going to play him. Josh Jacobs, how we feeling? Renfrow, how we feeling? Darren Waller, even, how are we feeling?
Josh Jacobs, I feel pretty good about. I mean, he didn't get the amount of targets he did. Brandon Bolden being the running back too was like, what the heck is happening here? But Josh Jacobs, they were down most of that game, and you would hope that they're playing at least closer or ahead in this matchup, so that should be more favorable to the run game. He still had 5.7 yards per carry. I'm not too worried about rolling out Josh Jacobs in any of my leagues. And Darren Waller, 6 targets. I think if he can get that every week, he's talented enough to at least be a solid tight end. So a little bit of the ease off of the, okay, maybe he's going to be fine.
Yeah, I mean, and there's not many replacements for Darren Waller. Devontae Adams, I just want to give a quick story. His grandma will be in attendance. Be the first time she's ever seen him play professional football. So look for him to go off.
200 and 2 touchdowns.
So daily fantasy, pay up for Devontae Adams. That's all I got to say.
All right. Sunday night football.
Yeah.
Hey.
We're feeling the same. Sunday night football. There's really only one team to talk about, and that is the Chicago Bears. The other team doesn't matter.
Fair.
At least last week they didn't. Chicago Bears at the Green Bay Packers. The Bears had a lot of fun slipping, sliding on the field. Not going to be able to do that this week. Green Bay Packers, Aaron Rodgers was abysmal for fantasy purposes. Christian Watson dropping a big touchdown pass. It was painful to watch on the Packers side of the ball. The Bears, even though they won the game, they really didn't do much fantasy-wise for anybody. And it's kind of hard to tell what they could do because of the conditions. So David Montgomery, Darnell Mooney, what are we feeling? Do we trust either of them?
I have David Montgomery. I have David Montgomery like just the tier above a lot of these running backs we've been talking about so far in this show, like the Jeff Wilson, the J.K. Dobbins. So he's in my lineup pretty much everywhere I have him. Maybe you don't love it, but he is that borderline RB2 still. Khalil Herbert thing kind of does concern me, but really he did take carries and didn't look super effective. So it's not like he came out there and lit the world on fire. So Montgomery's safe for now, but it's something I'm keeping an eye on.
I mean, I'm not going to try to overreact to the rain game, but Khalil Herbert had 9 carries for 45 yards. That's 5 yards a carry, where David Montgomery had 17 carries, so almost double for 26 yards. That's 1.5 yards per carry. David Montgomery had more targets than Khalil Herbert, so he's still part of the pass game. But the one thing that the Packers did do well was shut down Dalvin Cook. He didn't really have any fantasy points until the last drive where they were down and they just let them run out the clock. He got about 20 yards in that last drive alone. So David Montgomery does scare me. I would look in a different option. Darnell Mooney, again, with the defensive backs, you have to be concerned about it. But we did just watch Justin Jefferson tear them up. We'll see if the Rams are not the Rams. Dear Lord, thank God we're not playing the Rams. We're playing the Bears. The Bears can do the same thing. But since I'm already talking, I'm just going to go ahead and I'll just roll us right into the Packers because I could talk about them forever, but I'll keep it real short. A.J. Dillon is an every week starter, just like Aaron Jones is. If Alan Lazard plays, he's flexible. Outside of that, Robert Tonyan is on the dartboard. It's a guy I like, but again, he's coming off an injury, so he could be limited. The Packers receivers of old, there has to be a must start. If Lazard doesn't go, there's still not a Packers receiver you have to start. So the 2 running backs and the tight end, and then we get to the receivers.
All right, fair enough. Cody got it. Let's move into the next game. I'll do the same thing he just did. It's Titans at the Bills. It's the first of the Monday night slate. On the Titans side of the ball, Derrick Henry. That's it. You don't start anybody else. Kyle Phillips is not practicing. He was the best receiver on the Titans last week. But right now, until they carve out a role, we don't know what they're doing. Tannehill looked good, not against the Bills, no. So Derrick Henry or bust on the Titans side of the ball. That's it. Bills, I mean, you're definitely starting Stephon Diggs. You're definitely starting Josh Allen. As far as the other receivers, do we like Isaiah McKenzie? Do we like Gabriel Davis? Do we trust any running back on that team? Dawson Knox, how thrilled are we after a 1-point performance?
Okay, Cody, go, please.
Okay, I'll go. I'll try to answer all the questions that Snyder just asked. He threw a lot at us in rapid fire fashion. Gabriel Davis, every week starter. Flip a coin between Isaiah McKenzie and Jamison Crowder. They're going to get involved. It'll be back and forth which week is which. But Gabe Davis, Stephon Diggs, your every week starters. Running backs, if I had to pick one, it'd be Devin Singletary. I don't love it, but that's the guy I would pick. Dawson Knox, no, I'm out on him. He's a sit candidate. He did sign the big extension. He was, a guy that we talked about as a potential like higher end tight end. Only scored week 1 point in week 1. The Titans, we don't talk about this a lot, but have had the Bills number the last 2 years. And last year, Dawson Knox walked away with a whopping 4 fantasy points after playing the Titans. So not a matchup I enjoy watching.
Man, the start sit guy nailed it. The only thing I can say is after this matchup, maybe you throw Dawson Knox into that mix with Isaiah McKenzie and Jamison Crowder and just throw a dart one of them 3. But yeah, no, this week I think I'm limiting it to Diggs and Gabe Davis.
All right, George. Doubleheader Monday night game. If you didn't catch it, well, there's 2 Monday night games. Ironically, Couch GMs Tyler's favorite team and Couch GM George's second favorite team are on Monday night, not playing against each other. The Minnesota Vikings versus the Philadelphia Eagles. George, tell us all about the Eagles in 30 seconds or less.
All right, Miles Sanders, he's back, especially if Trey Sermon's out, which you're not going to know beforehand, but I still think otherwise Sanders is getting enough carries, you start him. A.J. Brown might be a top 5 receiver if he keeps getting that many targets. I don't know if that's going to happen, but he's in. Dallas Goedert's also in your lineup. Devontae Smith, keep him on your bench. Don't overreact. I think he's going to get some targets here, but don't go and cut him. And then otherwise, I think that pretty much wraps it up on the Eagles.
Would you play their defense?
Not against Minnesota, but I like the idea if you have the roster spot to stash them because their next 3 or 4 games are easy.
Awesome. Or if they are out there because somebody dropped them, get ahead.
Yes.
Minnesota Vikings, since I watched them up close in person, demolish the Packers last week. Justin Jefferson leading as wide receiver 1 so far, as I predicted. So I'm just going to take the win now, and we're going to stop the count. And then Dalvin Cook, he's still in your lineups, but Alexander Mattinson did get a decent workload. It could be a little bit more of a split than we were expecting. That's just something to keep an eye on. Kirk Cousins, Monday night Kirk, you risk it if you want to play him or not. I still think the Vikings will be a good team, but maybe not a streamable option if you believe in superstitions. But I do want to ask you guys both, Adam Thielen, a late round draft pick, didn't look the best because obviously everything went to Justin Jefferson, but he's very similar to a Devonta Smith, like just completely different ages. But guys that will be parts of their offense moving forward, you might not want to start him in week 2 if you can avoid it. But if you have to, at least there is some upside that this could be another high-scoring game, and they could get some value.
Let me just throw in, there's a good chance that Darius Slay is going to follow Justin Jefferson, and Slay actually did not look super amazing in week 1, that would put James Bradbury on Adam Thielen, who gave up exactly 0 yards in week 1. So that's a tough matchup there.
Yes, because Adam Thielen and DJ Chark are the same player.
Fair, but you never know.
All right, boys. That was a full slate. These podcasts will get a little bit shorter as the season we start getting into bye weeks, but that's when you're going to need us the most. Any last thoughts on any of these matchups, or you all ready to head out?
My only thought is, guys, look, there's a lot of injuries already in the season. There is running backs stealing from the starters. Biggest thing is, remember, you're not alone in this. If you are struggling with what to do with your lineup, who to pick up, who to start, or honestly, you just want to talk some smack about how much George sucks at talking football, whatever you want to do, like, reach out to us. We're here to help. Check out our website, check out our TikToks, check out our social media, whatever you got to do. Just reach out to us and let us know what your questions are. We want to help you win a championship.
Absolutely. As always, thanks for listening.
Yeah, thank you all one more time for listening to Couch GMs podcast. For Cody Roadcap and Tyler Snyder, I'm George Kerth, and we'll see you all next week.
Nice.